7 years. That's how long Lyanna Frost Wind had been living alone in the cabin she built with her own hands, deep in the neutral territories where no pack dared to claim land. 7 years since the rejection that had almost destroyed her. 7 years since she had walked away from pack life, choosing solitude over belonging. The rejection now felt like a lifetime ago. She rarely thought about Damian Ashford anymore, the alpha who had stared at her pale hair and unusual eyes, and declared, in front of his entire pack, that he could never accept a mate touched by the curse of albinism. Never mind that Lyanna was only partially albino, her white blonde hair sometimes appearing simply very light, depending on the lighting, and her eyes a soft pale blue rather than the striking pink or violet of true albinism. To Damian and his traditionalist pack, any trace of the condition was enough to mark her as unacceptable. But that was 7 years ago. Lyanna was no longer the broken Omega who had fled into the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on her back and tears on her face. She had built a life here, a good life, one that didn't depend on pack approval or alpha acceptance. Her cabin was sturdy, well-maintained. Her garden provided enough food to last through winter, and she had earned a reputation among scattered rogues and travelers as a skilled healer who would treat anyone at her door. No questions asked. She liked her life. She liked the independence, the quiet, the freedom to make her own choices without anyone judging her appearance or questioning her worth. Yes, it could be lonely, especially during the long winter nights when the wind howled around her cabin, and the only company came from the occasional injured wolf seeking care. But lonely was better than rejected, and alone was better than unwanted. The storm had been building all day. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, the air charged with electricity that warned of something significant approaching. Lyanna had spent the afternoon securing her property, stacking extra firewood, and making sure all her animals were safely sheltered. She had faced enough wilderness storms to know this one would be fierce. What she hadn't expected was the pounding on her door 2 hours after darkness fell, voices shouting urgently, and the sound of weapons being readied. Lyanna approached cautiously, hand sliding to the silver knife on her belt. Visitors after dark were rare, and visitors during a storm were virtually unheard of. This could be trouble. Please. The voice that called through the door was male, carrying both authority and desperation. We need shelter. We have injured wolves, and a storm is nearly on us. I'm willing to pay whatever you ask, but please, we need help. Something in the voice made Lyanna pause. There was genuine fear there, genuine concern for others rather than just self-preservation. Against her better judgment, she cracked the door open just enough to see who was speaking. 10 wolves in human form stood in her clearing, all soaked from the rain that had already started falling. Several supported injured companions, and all looked exhausted and desperate. But what caught Lyanna's attention was the male who had spoken, tall and powerfully built, with an alpha presence so strong it made her omega nature want to submit, despite 7 years of training herself to ignore such instincts. "Who are you?" she demanded, keeping the door mostly closed and her knife visible. "Why should I let strangers into my home?" "My name is Kale," the alpha replied. There was something in the way he said it that suggested he wasn't sharing the whole truth. "We were on a scouting mission when we were ambushed by rogues 20 miles north of here. We've been traveling for hours trying to outrun them, but several of my people are injured and the storm is getting worse. Please, I know we're strangers, but I give you my word. We mean no harm." Lyanna studied the group carefully. 3 of the 10 were clearly wounded, supported by their companions. All of them shivered from cold and wet, and the storm was worsening by the minute. Turning them away would be a death sentence, especially for the injured. But letting 10 strangers into her home, her sanctuary, the place she had kept safe and private for 7 years, went against every protective instinct she had developed. Please, Kale said again, this time softer, more vulnerable. I know you have no reason to trust us, but my people are hurt, and I can't watch them die when shelter is so close. I'm begging you. As one wolf to another, please help us. 7 years ago, Lyanna might have said yes immediately, driven by her Omega compassion. But 7 years had taught her caution, to protect herself first. She was about to refuse when one of the injured wolves collapsed completely, and she saw the fear flash across Kale's face as he caught his fallen companion. Damn it, Lyanna muttered, recognizing the look of someone on the verge of losing consciousness from blood loss. Her healer's instincts warred with her self-preservation, and the healer won. Fine, but understand this. I'm allowing you shelter because people are hurt, not because I trust you. You follow my rules. You stay only until the storm passes and your people can travel safely. And you leave the moment I say so. Agreed? Agreed, Kale said immediately, relief washing over his features. Thank you. Truly. Lyanna opened the door wider and stepped back, letting the group file into her cabin. By her standards, it was a large space, but 10 additional wolves made it feel suddenly cramped and overwhelming. Injured ones on the floor by the fire, she commanded, her voice firm, the same authority she used when treating patients. Everyone else, find space along the walls and stay out of my way. I need to assess the wounded. To her surprise, all 10 obeyed without question. Even Kale, clearly the alpha, helped position the 3 injured wolves where Lyanna indicated, then stepped back to give her room to work. As she knelt beside the first patient, Lyanna became acutely aware of eyes on her. Not hostile, but curious, and she knew exactly what they were seeing. Even in the dim firelight, her pale hair stood out, her unusual coloring obvious to anyone who looked closely. Yes, I'm albino, she said bluntly, not looking up from the wound she was examining. Or close enough. If that's a problem for any of you, there's the door. It's not a problem, Kale said quietly. When Lyanna glanced up, she saw him watching her with an expression almost like wonder. You're a healer. I am. This one has a deep laceration that needs stitching, the second has what looks like a broken rib, and the third... She moved to the wolf who had collapsed, noticing he had lost a lot of blood and was going into shock. I can treat them, but it's going to take time. Whatever you need, Kale assured her. Just tell us how to help. The next several hours blurred into a flurry of activity. Lyanna worked with steady efficiency, treating wounds and setting the broken rib while directing the uninjured wolves on how to assist. Kale proved surprisingly adept at following instructions, holding patients still when needed, and anticipating what supplies she would need next. As she worked, Lyanna studied the group more closely. They moved with military precision despite exhaustion and stress. Their gear was high quality, their weapons expertly maintained. This wasn't just any group of rogues. These were professional soldiers. You said you were on a scouting mission, Lyanna said, as she stitched the worst of the lacerations. Scouting for who? What pack do you belong to? There was a moment of hesitation, several wolves exchanging glances with Kale. Finally, he sighed. We're from the Northern Territory Royal Pack. I'm the Alpha King's personal scout, and these are my team. Lyanna's hand stilled on the bandage she was wrapping. These weren't just soldiers. They were elite royal guards, which meant the Alpha who had been giving her orders and helping with her patients was... You're not just any Kale, are you? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. You're Commander Kale Winterborn, the Alpha King's second-in-command. I am, he confirmed, watching her face closely as if trying to gauge her reaction. Does that change anything? Lyanna resumed her bandaging, forcing her hands to remain steady. It means you're more likely to be able to pay for the supplies I'm using. Other than that, no. I don't care about pack politics or royal hierarchies out here. You're just patients who need treatment. She felt rather than saw Kale's surprise at her response, but he said nothing. Outside, the storm had reached its full fury. Rain pounded the cabin roof, and wind rattled the windows. This was going to be a long night. By the time all 3 injured wolves were stabilized and sleeping peacefully by the fire, it was well past midnight. The 7 uninjured wolves had found spots to rest around the cabin's perimeter, exhaustion finally claiming them. Only Lyanna and Kale remained awake, sitting across from each other with the fire between them. "Thank you," Kale said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "You saved their lives tonight. I won't forget that." "I'm a healer," Lyanna replied, checking the sleeping patients one more time. "It's what I do out here alone." There was curiosity in his voice, but also something like concern. "How long have you been living in isolation?" 7 years. And it's not isolation, it's independence. There's a difference." "Is there?" Kale leaned forward slightly, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like someone who's hiding from the world." Lyanna felt irritation flare in her chest. "You don't know anything about me or why I choose to live this way." "You're right. I don't. But I recognize pain when I see it. And I recognize someone who's been hurt badly enough to believe being alone is safer than risking connection." The accuracy of his observation made Lyanna's defenses slam into place. "This conversation is over. Get some sleep, Commander. I'll wake you if any of the patient's conditions change." She stood and moved to the far corner of the cabin, putting as much distance between them as possible. But she could still feel his eyes on her, and she hated how aware she was of his presence. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 long, tense days of being trapped in close quarters with 10 wolves who were technically strangers, but who were gradually becoming something else through forced proximity and shared experience. Kale, despite his high rank and obvious authority, never tried to take control of her cabin. He deferred to her judgment on medical matters, helped with daily chores without being asked, and kept his team disciplined and respectful. The other wolves treated her with genuine courtesy, thanking her for meals and medical care, and never once commented negatively on her appearance. It was disorienting to be around pack wolves who didn't look at her with disgust or pity when they noticed her coloring. Several even complimented her hair. One of the younger wolves, a beta named Marcus, who had suffered the broken rib, told her earnestly that she looked like a snow spirit from the old stories, but it was Kale who confused her the most. He sought her company during quiet moments, asking about her healing techniques and her life in the wilderness with genuine interest. He never pushed when she deflected personal questions, but she could feel him trying to understand her, to unravel the mystery of why a skilled healer lived alone in neutral territory. On the second night, after everyone else had gone to sleep, Lyanna found herself sitting with Kale by the fire again. The storm still raged outside, and the darkness and isolation made it easier to speak honestly. "I was rejected," she said suddenly, not looking at him, 7 years ago, by an alpha who said my albinism made me unacceptable as a mate. He did it publicly, made sure everyone in his pack knew I was defective. She felt Kale's attention sharpen, but he didn't interrupt. "I tried to stay in the pack after that. Tried to prove I had value despite my appearance. But every day was torture. The pitying looks, the whispers, the constant reminders that I wasn't good enough. So I left, came out here, and built a life where no one could judge me or find me lacking." "He was a fool," Kale said quietly. "The alpha who rejected you. A blind fool who couldn't see value when it was standing right in front of him." "That's what people always say," Lyanna replied with a bitter laugh, "but it doesn't change the fact that he was right about one thing. In pack society, appearance matters, status matters, and an omega with albinism will never be valued the way a normal omega would be." "Is that why you're hiding out here? Because you believe that?" "I'm not hiding. I'm choosing a life where I don't have to constantly prove my worth to people who will never truly accept me." Kale was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a vulnerability she hadn't heard before. 7 years is a long time to be alone. Don't you ever want connection, community, someone to share your life with? I did once, Lyanna admitted. But wanting something and being willing to risk the pain of losing it again are two different things. She felt his eyes on her face, studying her in the firelight, and had to resist the urge to turn away. What if I told you that you don't have to choose between connection and safety? Kale asked softly. What if there was a place where you could be valued for your skills and character rather than judged for your appearance? I'd say you're describing a fantasy, Lyanna replied. That place doesn't exist. It does. In my pack. In the royal territory. He leaned forward, his expression intense. The Alpha King has made it clear that discrimination based on physical appearance is not tolerated. We have wolves of all types serving at every level, valued for their abilities rather than their bloodlines or designations. That's very progressive of your king, Lyanna said, hearing the skepticism in her own voice. But it doesn't change anything for me. I've built a life here, a good life. I don't need rescue or charity from some enlightened pack. I'm not offering charity, Kale said. Something in his tone made her look at him directly. I'm offering opportunity, a chance to use your healing skills on a larger scale, to have resources and support instead of struggling alone. A chance to be part of something bigger than just survival. And in return, I'd have to give up my independence and subject myself to pack hierarchy again. No, thank you. Even if I gave you my word that you would be respected and valued, that your autonomy would be protected? Words are cheap, Commander. I've heard promises before. The next morning, the storm finally began to ease. The injured wolves were recovering well, and Kale's team started preparing to leave as soon as it was safe to travel. Lyanna told herself she was relieved, that she'd be happy to have her cabin back, and return to her peaceful solitude. But as she watched them prepare to depart, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: reluctance to see people go. Over 3 days, these wolves had treated her with more genuine respect and kindness than most pack wolves had shown her in years. And Kale? She refused to examine too closely what she felt about him leaving. The injured ones should rest at least 2 more days before attempting any serious travel, she told Kale as he packed supplies. That broken rib especially needs time to set properly. I know. We'll move slowly and carefully. He paused in his packing to look at her directly. Lyanna, I meant what I said about the opportunity. If you ever change your mind, you would be welcome in the royal territory, as a healer, as a pack member, as whatever you wanted to be. I won't change my mind, she said, trying to sound certain. Maybe not, but just in case. He pulled something from his pack and held it out to her. It was a medallion bearing the royal crest. This will guarantee you safe passage through any territory in the north and immediate audience with the Alpha King if you choose to use it. No obligation, no pressure, just options. Lyanna stared at the medallion but didn't reach for it. I don't need this. Maybe not, but I'd feel better knowing you have it. When she still didn't take it, he set it carefully on the table between them. Keep it or throw it away. That's your choice. But know that the offer stands now and always. The team left an hour later, once the storm had eased enough to make travel relatively safe. Lyanna stood in her doorway, watching them disappear into the forest, telling herself this was what she wanted. Her cabin would be quiet again, peaceful again, exactly the way she liked it. The medallion sat on her table for days, untouched but impossible to ignore. Lyanna tried to return to her normal routine, but something had shifted. The cabin felt emptier than ever. Her days felt longer. The silence that had once been peaceful now felt oppressive. She kept replaying conversations with Kale in her mind, remembering the way his team had treated her with such easy respect. She kept wondering what life might be like in a place where she didn't have to prove her worth every single day. 2 weeks after the team's departure, Lyanna had a visitor. An elderly wolf staggered to her door, bleeding from multiple wounds. From his scent, she could tell he was from a pack she had treated before. Decent wolves, who sometimes sent injured members her way. "Please," the old wolf gasped. "Rogues attacked our settlement. I'm the only one who escaped. You have to help them." Lyanna's blood ran cold. "How many rogues? How many wolves in your settlement?" 20 rogues at least. Only 12 of us. Mostly elderly and young. They wanted our territory. Said we were weak and easy targets. 20 rogues against 12 defenseless wolves. By the time Lyanna could get any help, everyone would be dead. Unless... Her eyes fell on the medallion. 10 minutes later, Lyanna was running through the forest faster than she had in years. The old wolf's directions burned into her memory. Kale's medallion clutched tightly in her hand. She had no idea if this would work, if the promise of safe passage and royal audience was real or just empty words meant to make her feel better. But she had to try. 3 hours into her journey, the royal patrol found her. 6 wolves in official armor appeared from the trees, weapons ready. Lyanna barely managed to gasp out, "Royal medallion!" before collapsing from exhaustion. The patrol commander took one look at the medallion, and his entire demeanor changed. "Where did you get this?" "Commander Kale gave it to me. I need to get to the royal pack immediately. There's an attack happening. Wolves are dying. I need..." "How far? What direction?" Lyanna rattled off the information, her words tumbling over each other in urgency. The patrol commander listened intently, then made a series of rapid decisions. Half his team ran back toward the royal territory, while the other half prepared to head toward the settlement. "You're coming with us," he told Lyanna firmly. "Commander Kale left standing orders that if you ever use that medallion, you are to be given immediate protection and escort." The rescue mission that followed was something Lyanna would never forget. The patrol that met them at the settlement was 30 wolves strong, with Kale himself at the head. The rogues, suddenly vastly outnumbered by royal guards, either fled or surrendered. The settlement wolves were saved, though several were badly injured. Through it all, Lyanna worked alongside the royal healers, treating wounds and coordinating care, while Kale directed his soldiers with calm efficiency. It was nearly dawn before the situation stabilized enough for anyone to rest. Lyanna found herself sitting by a fire, exhausted and covered in blood that wasn't her own, when Kale dropped down beside her. "You used the medallion," he said quietly. "I didn't know what else to do. An entire settlement was about to be slaughtered. You ran for 3 hours straight to get help for wolves who weren't even your pack. They were patients, people you'd treated before. You couldn't just let them die." Kale was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know what I see when I look at you, Lyanna? I see someone who's been telling herself she doesn't need anyone, that she's fine alone. But the moment someone needed help, you didn't hesitate. You used the one lifeline you had, called for backup, and put yourself at risk to save people who had no claim on you. What's your point?" "My point is that you're not as independent as you think you are. You're not meant to be alone. You're meant to be part of something, helping people, making a difference. You're just afraid to admit it because that means risking rejection. And if you're rejected again, if you try to be part of something and it doesn't work out, then you'll deal with it. But Lyanna, you can't let one alpha's stupidity 7 years ago dictate the rest of your life. You deserve more than hiding in the wilderness." Tears built behind Lyanna's eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "I don't know how to trust again. I don't know how to risk being part of something when I know it could fall apart." "Then start small," Kyle suggested gently. "Come stay at the royal territory for a month. Work with our healers. See what it's like. If you hate it, you can leave any time and go back to your cabin. But give it a chance. Give yourself a chance." Lyanna looked at him, seeing the genuine care in his eyes and the patience in his expression. Over 3 days, trapped in her cabin and one night of the desperate rescue mission, this Alpha had somehow seen past every wall she had built and recognized the lonely, hurt Omega underneath. Someone who desperately wanted to belong somewhere, but was too afraid to try. "1 month," she said finally. "I'll try it for 1 month, but I make no promises beyond that." The smile that spread across Kyle's face was worth every bit of fear she was feeling. The royal territory was nothing like Lyanna expected. The healer's compound was a massive facility, with resources she had never dreamed of. But what struck her most was the atmosphere. Wolves of all ranks worked together with easy camaraderie, and no one looked twice at her unusual coloring. If anything, several wolves complimented her hair or asked questions about her healing techniques with genuine interest. Kale kept his promise to give her space while still making sure she felt supported. He would stop by the healer's compound occasionally to check on her, always respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. As days turned into weeks, Lyanna found herself looking forward to those visits, found herself seeking out his company during meals, found herself trusting him with small pieces of her story, her fears, her hopes for the future. "You're different from what I expected," she admitted one evening as they walked through the compound gardens. "When I heard Commander of the Royal Guard, I imagined someone cold and militaristic. But you're surprisingly human. Surprisingly kind, patient, understanding," he suggested with a smile. She hesitated, then added, "I'm glad you forced your way into my cabin during that storm. I'm glad you let us in." "I'm glad," Kyle replied, "even though I know it went against every protective instinct you'd developed." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Lyanna asked, "Why did you give me that medallion?" "Really, it wasn't just about recruitment or finding a healer for your territory." Kyle stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "Because from the moment I saw you, something in me recognized you." "I'm not finished," she interrupted, voice trembling but steady with intention. "I need you to understand something before you say anything back." Kale immediately quieted, giving her his full attention the way he always did, as if nothing in the world mattered more than what she was about to say. Lyanna swallowed hard. "I'm still scared. I still have moments where I look in the mirror and hear Damian's voice telling me I'm defective. I still flinch when someone raises their voice. I still wake up some nights convinced I don't belong here, or that one mistake will send everything crashing down." Her fingers curled into her palms, nails digging into her skin just to steady herself. "Loving you doesn't erase any of that. It doesn't magically fix me." Kale stepped closer, but not close enough to touch. Close enough that she felt the warmth of him, the grounding presence, the quiet promise of patience. "Lyanna," he murmured, but she lifted a hand, needing to finish. "I'm telling you I love you," she said, voice cracking, "but I can't promise I won't panic sometimes. I can't promise I won't need reassurance or space or patience. I can't promise I'll be easy to love." Her throat tightened with emotion, but she forced the last words out. "What I can promise is that I'm trying, that I want this, that I want you, even if the fear hasn't fully gone away." For a long heartbeat, Kale didn't move. He simply looked at her, eyes filled with a depth she had never seen directed at her by any wolf, alpha or otherwise. Not pity, not obligation, something fierce and reverent. Then he closed the distance slowly, giving her every chance to step back. When she didn't, his hand rose, not to grab, not to claim, but to gently, reverently cup her cheek. "Lyanna," he said, voice low and rough with emotion, "loving you will never be a burden, not your fears, not your scars, not your healing process. None of it." His thumb brushed lightly against her skin, not wiping tears this time, just touching her like she was something precious. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to walk with you while you heal, at your pace, on your terms. Her breath shook. And you're wrong about one thing, he added softly. You are easy to love. You always have been. You were easy to love from the moment you opened your door to a group of strangers in a storm. A soft, helpless sound escaped her. Kale leaned his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. I love you, Lyanna. Not in spite of your fears, not despite your past, including all of it. Because all of it made you who you are. His voice dropped to a whisper. And who you are is extraordinary. Her eyes closed, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel broken or defective or unworthy. She just felt loved. Truly, irrevocably loved. And for the first time since her rejection, Lyanna allowed herself to believe that this time, this love, might actually be safe. If we do this, Lyanna whispered, voice trembling. If I let myself be with you, I need to know that you're in this completely. That you won't wake up one day and decide my appearance is too unusual, or that I'm not valuable enough to stand beside a commander. I need to know that you see me, all of me, and want me anyway. I see you, Kale said, closing the distance until they shared the same breath. I've seen you from the beginning. Your strength, your compassion, your stubborn independence, your beautiful heart. And yes, I see your white hair and unusual eyes, and they're perfect because they're part of you. You are not a compromise or a second choice, or someone I'm settling for. You are everything I've been waiting to find. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place Lyanna had never been, but had always been searching for. 7 years of walls and protection came crashing down. In their place was something terrifying, wonderful, and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, Lyanna was crying again, but this time they were tears of happiness rather than pain. I'm still scared, she admitted. Good, Kyle replied, pulling her close. Being scared means you're being brave, and I'll be right here beside you every step of the way. The rejected Omega, who had spent 7 years alone in the wilderness, had finally found her way home, not because she was rescued or had no other choice, but because she had been brave enough to risk connection again. Brave enough to trust that not every Alpha was like the one who had rejected her. Brave enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be loved exactly as she was. And when the Alpha King himself asked Kale about the remarkable albino healer who had captured his second-in-command's heart, Kale's response was simple and absolute. She's the strongest wolf I've ever met, Your Majesty, and I'm the luckiest Alpha alive that she chose to give me a chance. Sometimes rejection is just the universe's way of clearing a path for something better. Sometimes living alone is necessary to learn your own strength. And sometimes, when you finally open your door to let someone in from the storm, you discover that what you thought was an ending was actually just the beginning of everything you never knew you needed.